Hello everybody. In this video, I'm going to be discussing, and as they say in Mexico, why not? ¿Por qué no? Maybe developing these ideas a little further. So today I saw some academic presentations that were based on the idea of reflection and action, and basically the different opinions and ideas that different people had on these. And for me, they generated a lot of inquiries, a lot of questions, right? Very interesting stuff. So I'm going to get into the first one. I think that it helps to define something by defining what it isn't, right? Like its opposite. I think I've done this in the past with certain things, like the truth is not a lie, right? Or the opposite of truth is lie. So first, what is reflection and what is action? Are the opposites impulsivity and inaction? So during this presentation, we had a lot of people say that you needed to reflect before you act, right? That's like the common notion. I'm going to get deeper into all of these topics, but the main idea is like there are people that act, and maybe after they act, they reflect. But what's more important is that you need to reflect first, that is, think about things and then act them out, right? Now, they were saying that if you don't do that, then what you're really doing is you're being impulsive, right? So that, like, the word impulsive came out a lot, and being impulsive is bad, right? Which I disagree with. I think impulsivity is kind of tied in with instinct and intuition, and those type of things you really don't need reason for. You just kind of know what to do, right? Which is based more on expertise and experience and knowledge, and throughout the years, maybe as you get older, but we'll get to that eventually. So impulsivity in this case would be just doing things. Now, would that be the opposite of reflection? Depends on how you view it, because reflection could be impulsive too. That is, reflection could have the characteristics of intuition, right? Like you're not basing yourself really on experience or on reasons. You're basing your reflection more on intuitions, right? Which could potentially be impulsive. So I wouldn't really say it's the opposite, but it is something to think about. Now, is the opposite of action inaction? So if you talk about doing things, carrying them out, and then you talk about what is the opposite of that, you would probably end up in inaction, in laziness, in static, right? In not moving, not doing anything, right? Or just doing the bare minimum. So we could say that as far as that one is concerned, it would kind of be correct. But let me know what you think. Now, there was this idea that I also thought about during the presentation, which is, when do you stop developing? Now, we're talking about reflection and action based on how to learn, right? So based on the learning teaching process per se. And basically, the idea of developing is very common among kids, right? So when you talk about a kid is developing, right? They go to school, they're growing, they're maturing when they're teenagers, right? And then as a young adult, you're still developing. But the line between developing and like developed is kind of blurred, right? Like if you look at a 50 or a 60-year-old, you may say, oh yeah, are they developed? Are they grown already? Are they matured? Which is this idea of perfection. Like, are they finished, right? Are they dead? Are they unchangeable, unalterable? They're not going to change or transform anymore? No, I personally, I think you're always developing. But there is a common misconception that, especially when you compare yourself to younger generations, you tend to say, or people tend to say, yeah, like I'm developed already, like I'm grown, right? And it's like, yeah, you may be physically grown or whatever, or maybe not even, because you're still gonna get fatter, taller, whatever. Maybe not taller, but you may gain weight or something. So you're not even developed in that sense yet. But I think you're always developing, right? And I don't know why and I don't really know when it happens. I would dare say maybe in your 40s, in your 50s, people get this idea in their heads that they have no more developing to do. right? Which I haven't hit that age, so maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I don't think it is, but that was also like an idea I had. This one, who taught you to reflect? So we all reflect, right? We all sit there, think about our past, think about things we've done, maybe even think about the possibilities in the future. But who taught you to do that? And I think the way in which you do that is, well, first of all, if you like reflecting, you're probably a person that just does it on their own, right? Like you sit there talking to yourself with your inner voice. They say some people talk out loud too. Excuse me, like when you're asking yourself questions like, okay, so what are we talking about? Where are we at? Where is this leading? What is this leading to, right? Etc. But I'm thinking there had to be a person that did it to you first, maybe like your mom, um, or I dare say it could just be something that we do naturally, like, and there are just some people that do it a lot. Like for example, I do it a lot. There are some people that do it, averagely, and there are some people that may just not do it at all or barely do it. But it is an interesting question, like who taught you to reflect? Maybe it could have been your teachers, authority figures, right? That would like question your actions when you were a kid, like why did you steal that, or why did you. And you had to give a reason. So when you're forced to give a reason, you're forced to reason, to explain yourself. Hence, you're forced to reflect, right? You're When you answer a why question, you're thinking, right? You're reflecting. So yeah, basically anybody that's ever asked you a why question, right? Maybe even your mom. And I guess that is kind of built up through, what's it called, um, like people trying to correct your behavior, right? So there's this other idea: the level of reflection is based or proportionate to how important the action was to you. So, kind of going a little bit back to the idea that there are people that barely reflect, could it be because what they experience in their lives is not viewed by them as important, as crucial? So they just kind of dust it off, and they put it off to the side, and they say, I don't really care about reflecting on my life, even though that's actually the solution to an identity crisis, reflection, right? Which I talked about in the previous video. But yeah, is that why people barely reflect? And this also begs the question, like if you have a crisis or a major change or something that is super important to you happen, right? Does that need or demand a higher level of reflection? Do you need more time to reflect, right? If the action was like really important, that just happened or that you did, right? Now, there was this idea thrown out there too, that there is both negative and positive reflection and action. So you have the negative reflection, which I'm guessing is this kind of like you're chewing on the past, but it's destructive, right? It's not constructive. It's not taking you anywhere. You're like reflecting, but in a negative light, right? You just put yourself down. And then there's reflection, like I guess of the positive. At a primary level, we could just be talking about like criticizing yourself or praising yourself, right? But it can get deeper than that, and more nuanced, right? Like what is really positive, what is really negative, and negative and positive action. Obviously, if you do things that lead, well, the primary or the basic idea here would be that if you do something and it has negative consequences, it was a negative action, it was a negative cause. And if it has positive consequences, it was a positive cause. Now we can get into the long-term, short-term element of it, but because that would change things around a little bit. And the role of self-sabotage and insecurities, right? So self-sabotage, like I spoke in my complexes video, are like these things that we do to ourselves to impede or obstacleize our journey or our growth, right, in life. And obviously people are riddled with insecurities, that limit their action, right? And these may be due to reflection, right? Like metacognition, overthinking, right? I'm guilty of this, right? Like you doubt yourself, you think you're not, good enough, or you just won't even try because you're like, I'm not gonna, that's not gonna get me anywhere. I'm just wasting time, money, resources, whatever. So somebody said, thinking leads to reflection, and it is a cognitive process. Now, this is important because in order to reflect, first you need to start by thinking, right? That's the idea. So first you think, and thinking will lead to reflection, and it is a cognitive process. Now, I was listening and reading Jordan Peterson, and in his book Maps of Meaning, he was talking about definitions, classifications, and categorizations. Excuse me. And how these are cognitive process that humans do, basically trying to define, categorize, and classify, like for example, furniture, right? The tables, chairs, whatever, animals, cats, dogs, whatever. But he says that we don't really categorize things for what they are in itself. You know, that noumenon idea, noumenon versus phenomenon, right? Phenomenon is what we experience, what we see with our senses, and the noumenon is the thing in itself without our interference or without our observations. The thing in itself, we can never know what the thing in itself is, right? And this kind of blew my mind because it is true, I think. We define, classify, and categorize things not based on their noumenon characteristics, what they truly are, but rather on how they fit our human needs, right? Think about a chair. Like if you could, like Jordan Peterson gives an example of a chair. If you can sit on a chair, then it's furniture, right? So it's according to our needs, right? Not to what it is in itself. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And back to the idea of reflection and action, you have thought. Thought is theory. It could be viewed that way too, versus experience, which could be viewed as practice, right? Like actually doing things. And this leads ultimately to expertise, right? Like they say, practice makes perfect. So if you have experience, if you are living and you're doing these things, maybe guided by thought, by theory, right, and you're practicing, you're eventually going to get good at it, right? And there was a lot of talk about instinct and intuition and impulsivity and how that's bad. I think people relate impulsiveness with anger, but impulsivity is not only exclusive to anger. Impulsivity can be like you're just fast, and I gave this example of, if you're a soccer player that's been playing soccer for like 20, 30, 40 years, you don't have to think about how you're going to score a goal, right? You just do it. If you've been doing something for so many years, you have so much experience and practice in it, your instinct, your intuition, your impulsivity is just gonna get you the results, right? You don't even have to think about it anymore. So this leads me to think that you need to reflect more when you're learning how to do something, right? Or maybe when you're sharing something, like as in podcast, right? When people talk about their experience while they were on the set or on the making of the movie, or about their careers, right? Like in an interview, right? They reflect and they talk about that because they want to share it, because they want to teach, whatever the reason. But once you're good at it, I don't think you need to reflect, right? Now that may lead into complacency, right? Which would be kind of bad, because you would limit yourself from learning anymore, right? But I think it's the idea of saying, I have nothing else to learn, or at best I have some things to learn, but they're very few things, right? Which, you're not sure about that. But okay, this practice, this constant practice and experience, again, could lead to expertise, which in my opinion, I would question if this is the real intuition and instinct, right? That offers speed, right? Which one of the presentations said it offers speed, this is the system one thinking process, right? There are two systems. The system one is based on instinct, unconscious, emotional, which is just like doing, right? It's fast. And system two is rational thinking. So that's slower, that needs to take its time, really look at everything, understand everything, right? Where I think I use, especially for like these videos and just I think in general in my life, I use a lot of system one. Now people would say that's bad because you're gonna make mistakes. And I would say, well, practice makes perfect, because if you practice it often enough, you'll eventually get good at it and you'll make fewer and fewer mistakes each time, right? So it's just a matter of not doubting yourself, beginning the journey of using your system one, right? Because a system two is very slow and everybody uses their system two, but you never get good, you never get fast, right? Um, Especially at thinking, right? Now, yeah, so could that really be intuition and instinct, right? Which this would be basically like the notion of having intuition, instinct, or impulsivity backed up by experience, right? So it's that soccer player, who's been doing it for years, and it's one of the best soccer players in the world, scoring a goal without even thinking about it, right? Like they just do it because their intuition lets them know, their unconscious guides them, right? They don't have to think about it like a person, like a younger player maybe starting out, like in a professional league or something like that. Um, so yeah, and so this can be both applied to reflection and action. So if you use a system one, you can reflect faster, right? Like, and that's kind of interesting because you don't have to do things. A lot of people think that intuition or impulsivity or instinct have to do with doing things, but it could just be like thinking faster, right? Just for the exercise, just think faster and think about things faster. But you can also take your time while you think, right? And use system two. And also when you act, you can act faster, such as when you're in traffic, right? And you're sure about things, backed up by experience, right? Well, yeah, you do need that experience. But you can also use your system too, like when you're not sure what's happening, right? Like there are cars coming from both angles, from both sides. Like I gotta use my system too, right? I gotta be slow. I gotta really be careful and rationalize here, right? I can't use my intuition because I may get in an accident, right? Um, okay, so I think when we first learn something, obviously we're going to use our system too, our rational thinking system, right? Um, and I think it pretty much goes like this. Like, how is it that you learn something? This is using the memories, right? We know we have different memories, like long-term, short-term, episodic, procedural, right? So I'm going to break it down. I think it goes from long-term memory, right? We go from the explicit side, right? So something needs to be made explicit, right? It's like the kid asking, why, what's that, right? Like, I need you to explicitly tell me what the hell this is, right? Why does it work like this? How does it work, right? When you're learning new things, you have to ask those explicit questions, right? Like, explain this to me, like, explicitly. And you can explain in two different ways, which I think this is in order. First, episodically. Episodically is like sequentially, orderly, right? Like first, second, third. And this basically has to do with like stories, how stories are told, right? Like first I arrived home and then I took a shower and then this happened, right? And the lesson is embedded in there, right? Like what you want the other person to learn, it's like the moral of the story. That's episodic, right? Or this one time I was driving like this and this happened, so don't do it like that, right? That's episodic. And it basically comes from like experience, right? Or idealization, imagination of what you think things could look like or what they could be, right? But again, based kind of like on experience. There's the semantic, right? And like I said, first it would be episodic and then semantic. Now, semantic, I think, is from meaning. So that's completely conceptual, completely theoretical. It's like learning how to drive, right? Excuse me. Or like being taught how to play soccer, right? Like you're going to learn concepts you need to study, right? But you're learning this way. And all of this is explicit. It's very conscious. And eventually, after doing it for so often, you land in what's known as implicit memory. So implicit memory, they say it's like emotional, but it's procedural, right? So now you know how to do it, implicitly without thinking about it, right? Unconsciously, emotionally, right? Almost like walking, like breathing, right? Like you don't have to reflect, right? Like now you just act, right? And you do things good. Can you still make mistakes? Of course, right? It's circumstantial, right? Or it may be because of you, lack of sleep, whatever. But um, I would say 90, 80% of the time, you're going to hit the target, right? You're going to hit the bullseye. And that's how you obtain knowledge, right? And it's basically using your memory. So we go back to the basics of psychology, talking about memory, right? Now, here's a question that I was asking myself. How much experience, if we're talking about experience being like the ultimate, goal of, being good at something instinctively or intuitively or procedurally, unconsciously, right? Mechanically, automatically. How much experience then? How many hours do you need, right? Um, to even be good at reflecting, right? And this that was like that was kind of like the twist, right? Um, yeah, because you could be good at, they say you need like what 10,000 hours doing something to be good at it. But what about reflection? How can you get good at reflecting, right? At decision making, at hypotheticals, at theory, right? And then obviously it's going to be evaluated or judged based on your physical, tangible, real world external results, right? You can't just say, "Oh yeah, I'm so good at reflecting," and you're living a poor life, or up to society standards, right? Because you could have your own standards, right? Your own internal standards, and then in those cases, you're your own judge, right? Fuck what everybody else thinks. Um, but yeah, then it says here, because even reason can leave a man mad if that is all he has left. And this is from Jordan Peterson. I was listening to a conversation that he was having. I forget the name of the person right now, but I just started that video of him. And they're talking about right hemisphere, left hemisphere, And there's this thing that the guy says, which I thought was really interesting. And they're talking about like paranoia disorder, schizophrenia, and this type of thing. And he says, yeah, sometimes a mad man, right, like a crazy man, people will think that he lost all reason, right? That he doesn't reason anymore, when in fact, all he has left is reason, right? Which is an excessive left hemisphere function. If you know about the hemispheres, you know that the left hemisphere is the executive side of the brain, right? The one that makes the decisions, the conscious part, you can almost say, right? So it's like, and if you talk to a crazy person, they'll reason with you. They'll explain why they're right. Their reason is off, obviously. It's wrong. It's illogical, you can say, but they're reasoning, right? So that kind of leads us, and that's the only thing they have left. They don't have this right intuitive imagination mind, right, which talks about alternatives. So I think this video I'm watching is going to be pretty interesting, because ultimately it's going to be talking, it's basically flipping the two hemispheres upside down, or in this case it's inverting them, because it's saying that yes, we do tend, as a society, we do tend to appreciate the left hemisphere more, no? Like people saying, be organized, be structured, be orderly. But if that's all you are, that's dull, right? That becomes repetitive. There's no room really for growth, right? So we do need that other right hemisphere interaction, and the combination between both, right? So yeah, this talk basically comes because they're trying to say that we overuse our left brain, right? Our left hemisphere, which I think is correct. It's on the dot, because if you were to maybe use your right hemisphere, if you were to, and this kind of ties in with everything I've been talking about, because the right hemisphere is your intuition, is your instinct, right? It's like everything that you've taught your left hemisphere when you first start to learn something, right? And you do it consciously, aware, executively, right? Decision making, conscious. Eventually, it's going to end up on your right hemisphere, where you do it automatically. But that doesn't mean that the left just feeds the right. The right, once it has that cumulative knowledge, it could also feed the left hemisphere, right? So Jordan Peterson gets into it with this guy on the hemispheres. They're talking about the whole and the parts. They're talking about categorization also, which is something that I read. Let me just share with y'all the name of the video in case you want to watch it, because it's so far it's very interesting. It's complex, but it's nice. The video is called Wisdom, Delusion, Consciousness, and the Divine with Dr. Ian Ian McGilchrist. McGilchrist, right? Gil Christ. And yeah, this was kind of like a long video. I had a lot to say, but I hope you enjoyed it. That's all I got for this one. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.